You ever notice how the universe has this uncanny way of dropping exactly what you need right into your path at the precise moment you're actually ready to receive it? Not when you think you want it, not when you're desperately grasping for it, but when something deep inside you has shifted into alignment with what's trying to emerge. If you're here right now, if something pulled you to click on this video, it's not because YouTube's algorithm got lucky. It's because you've crossed an invisible threshold that most people never even know exists. You've moved from wanting transformation to actually being ready for it. And trust me, the universe can feel the difference. See, most people spend their entire existence trapped in the wanting phase, wanting to feel different, wanting better relationships, wanting financial freedom, wanting to finally figure out what they're supposed to be doing with their precious time on this planet. But wanting is safe, it's comfortable, it lets you dream about change without actually having to face the terrifying reality of becoming someone new. Readiness, though, readiness is when you've run out of excuses. It's when staying exactly where you are becomes more painful than the unknown territory of transformation. And here's what nobody tells you about crossing into readiness. It doesn't announce itself with fanfare or motivational speeches. It usually shows up disguised as a bone-deep exhaustion that you can't shake. You wake up one morning and you're tired, not physically tired, but soul tired, tired of your own patterns that keep playing on repeat, tired of having the same internal conversations that lead nowhere, tired of feeling like you're watching your life happen to someone else, like you're trapped behind glass, observing, but not really participating in your own existence. That exhaustion isn't weakness. It's your soul finally saying enough. It's the part of you that knows who you're meant to become, refusing to tolerate the person you've been settling for being. And when that exhaustion reaches a certain depth, everything starts shifting, not because the external world suddenly rearranged itself to accommodate your desires, but because you finally stopped pretending that where you are is where you want to stay. You've been building toward this moment longer than you realize, gathering strength in ways you didn't even notice. Every disappointment that didn't break you, every time you got back up when staying down would have been easier, every moment you chose to try again when logic screamed quit. All of that was developing something inside you, not hope, not optimism, but something deeper and more reliable, resilience, the kind that doesn't need pep talks or external validation, the kind that just quietly knows it can handle whatever comes next. But here's where most people get stuck in the waiting room of their own lives. They mistake readiness for a feeling. They wait to feel ready, to feel confident, to feel like they have all the answers mapped out before they make a single move. That's not how readiness works, though. Readiness isn't a feeling, it's a recognition. It's the moment you stop asking if you're ready and start asking what you're going to do next. Because ready people don't wait for perfect conditions. They work with what they have, mess and all. Real readiness is starting before you feel prepared. It's making decisions with incomplete information because you finally understand that waiting for certainty is just another sophisticated form of hiding from your own potential. The person you're meant to become has been waiting patiently, not judging your timeline, not rushing your process, just waiting for you to get tired enough of your own limitations to finally meet them. They've been sending you signals for years. Those random moments when you felt capable of so much more, those glimpses of clarity, when everything suddenly made sense, those whispers of intuition that you kept dismissing as unrealistic or impossible. But something changes when you cross into true readiness. Those whispers get louder, not because they're shouting, but because you finally stopped covering your ears. You start noticing patterns you've been blind to for years. You start seeing opportunities that were always there, but invisible to your unprepared eyes. You start attracting different energy because you're finally vibrating at a frequency that matches your authentic potential. The universe has this interesting way of testing readiness, though. It doesn't send you what you want. It sends you what you need to prove you're serious. It gives you small opportunities to practice being the person you claim you want to become. Most people fail these tests because they're looking for the big break, the dramatic moment, the obvious sign. But readiness gets trained in the small moments, in choosing discipline over comfort, in saying no to things that don't align with who you're becoming. When you're truly ready, you stop waiting for permission from people who were never qualified to give it anyway. You stop needing everyone to understand your decisions. You realize that most of the obstacles you've been complaining about were actually just excuses dressed up as legitimate problems. The money, the time, the support, the knowledge, all the things you thought you were missing were never really the issue. The issue was that you weren't ready to receive them, to handle them, to be worthy of them in the deepest sense. And worthiness isn't about deserving, it's about capacity. It's about becoming the kind of person who can hold what they're asking for without self-destructing. How many times have you gotten exactly what you thought you wanted, only to sabotage it because deep down you didn't believe you belonged there? That's what happens when you receive something before you're internally ready for it. But when you've done the work, when you've faced your fears and healed your wounds and stopped running from the parts of yourself you'd rather not acknowledge, everything changes. You start showing up differently, not performing, not pretending, just being. You start making decisions from clarity instead of desperation. You start building instead of just consuming. You start creating instead of just complaining. This is why timing matters. This is why everything you've been through, all the false starts and failed attempts, and moments when you almost gave up but didn't, this is why all of that was necessary. You weren't ready then. You needed to learn exactly what you learned. You needed to fail exactly how you failed. You needed to discover your own strength the hard way, because that's the only way it truly integrates into who you are. The transformation that's trying to happen through you follows a predictable pattern that most people never recognize. It starts with what I call the dissolution, that phase where your old identity begins cracking apart. The beliefs that used to comfort you start feeling hollow. The stories you've told yourself about who you are and what's possible begin losing their grip on your imagination. Your familiar coping mechanisms stop working as reliably as they used to. This dissolution phase feels uncomfortable because identity death always does, even when it's making space for something infinitely more authentic to emerge. Most people panic here and try to glue their old self back together, but the cracks have already formed. There's no going back to unconscious living once consciousness has been activated. Then comes the void walk, that disorienting phase where you're no longer who you used to be, but not yet who you're becoming. Everything familiar falls away, and you're not sure what's coming to replace it. Your old excuses sound hollow even to you. Your old identity starts cracking, and for a while, you might not recognize yourself in the mirror. This is where most people turn back, deciding that maybe the old life wasn't so bad after all. They retreat into familiar dysfunction because uncertainty feels more dangerous than dissatisfaction. But if you can sit with the discomfort of not knowing who you're becoming while you're becoming it, if you can trust the process, even when you can't see the destination, that's where the magic happens. Because on the other side of that, uncertainty is a version of yourself you've never met, but somehow always known was there. The version that doesn't second guess every decision. The version that trusts their instincts without needing external confirmation. The version that can hold space for both success and failure without their identity collapsing. This brings us to the integration phase, where your new self begins stabilizing. You start operating from a completely different internal reference point. Decisions that used to paralyze you become straightforward. Situations that used to trigger your old patterns barely register as problems. You develop what I call authentic confidence. Not the kind that needs to prove itself, but the kind that simply knows. But here's what nobody warns you about. This transformation process comes with its own form of resistance that intensifies right before your breakthrough. It's like your old identity's death rattle, fighting to maintain control, even as it's dissolving. The internal voice that kept you safe in your small life suddenly gets very loud, very convincing, very urgent about why you should retreat back to familiar territory. And it's not just internal resistance. The people in your life who've been watching you struggle, they're going to notice this shift before you do. They're going to see you making different choices, setting different boundaries, responding to chaos with a calmness that wasn't there before. Some of them won't like it because your readiness threatens their comfort with staying stuck. Your willingness to change forces them to confront their own unwillingness to evolve. This is where you need specific practices to navigate successfully. Every morning, before you check your phone or engage with anyone else's energy, take 5 minutes to check in with your emerging identity. Ask yourself, who am I becoming today? What would the transformed version of me do in this situation? How would they show up differently when people resist your changes? Have a script ready, something like, I understand this feels different, and I'm not expecting you to change. I'm just asking for space to explore who I'm becoming. Don't justify. Don't explain extensively. Don't try to convince them. Just maintain your boundary with loving firmness. Protect your frequency during transformation, like your life depends on it, because it does. Limit exposure to energy vampires, negative news cycles, and people who are invested in your old story. Your nervous system is recalibrating. Treat it like you're recovering from surgery, because in a sense, you are. For decision-making, develop what I call the alignment filter. Before saying yes to anything, pause and ask, does this align with who I'm becoming or who I used to be? Does this expand me or contract me? Does this move me toward my emerging self or pull me back into my old patterns? And when things feel overwhelming, use this emergency grounding technique. Put both feet flat on the floor, take 3 deep breaths, and remind yourself that transformation always feels like death to the ego, but birth to the soul. You're not losing yourself. You're finding yourself. As you begin implementing these practices, something remarkable starts happening to your reality. You start attracting opportunities that match your new frequency. People begin responding to you differently, not because you're trying to impress them, but because authenticity is magnetic. You develop an inner authority that doesn't need external validation. The relationships that were draining your energy either transform or naturally fade away. making space for connections that actually nourish your soul. Work that felt like drudgery either becomes meaningful or you find yourself guided towards something that aligns with your purpose. Money flows more easily because you're no longer operating from scarcity and desperation. You start trusting your intuition like a trusted advisor rather than dismissing it as wishful thinking. Synchronicities increase because you're finally paying attention to the guidance that was always there. You develop what mystics call right timing, the ability to know when to act and when to wait without second-guessing yourself into paralysis. Most importantly, you stop managing other people's reactions to your growth. You stop shrinking yourself to make others comfortable. You stop apologizing for becoming who you were always meant to be. This isn't about becoming selfish or cutting people off. It's about finally understanding that you can't love anyone properly if you're not willing to love yourself enough to evolve. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes with readiness, not because you're alone, but because you're finally awake in a world full of people who are still sleepwalking through their lives. Conversations that used to drain your energy become intolerable. Situations you used to tolerate become impossible to ignore. People you used to seek validation from suddenly seem small and afraid. That loneliness isn't punishment. It's purification. It's your life clearing out everything that doesn't match your new frequency. Because ready people don't just attract different opportunities. They attract different people, the kind who aren't threatened by growth, who don't need you to stay small to feel secure, who celebrate your evolution instead of questioning it. Before those new people show up, though, you're going to walk through what feels like a desert of disconnection. Your old coping mechanisms don't work anymore. Your old excuses sound hollow even to you. Your old identity starts cracking. And for a while, you might feel like you don't recognize yourself. This is the final test, the place where transformation becomes irreversible. If you can push through this phase, if you can sit with the discomfort of not knowing who you're becoming while you're becoming it, you emerge as someone you've never been, but somehow always were. On the other side of that uncertainty lives the version of yourself that doesn't second-guess every decision, that trusts their instincts without needing a committee's approval, that can hold space for both success and failure without their identity collapsing. This version of you has been patiently knocking at the door of your consciousness, waiting for you to get tired enough of your limitations to finally open it. The voice that's been whispering to you, the one you've been drowning out with distractions and excuses and endless research, that voice is still there, and it's getting harder to ignore. It's not going to wait forever, not because it's impatient, but because life is moving with or without your participation. And if you've made it this far, if something inside you recognized itself in these words, if this conversation hits different than it would have 6 months ago, then the question isn't whether you're ready anymore. The question is what you're going to do about it. Because readiness without action is just another sophisticated form of waiting, and you've done enough waiting. Your moment is now, not when you feel more prepared, not when the conditions are perfect, not when you've figured out every detail. Now, because ready people don't wait for perfect timing. They make timing perfect by finally deciding to move. The doors are open, the path is clear. Your transformed self is no longer a fantasy. It's an inevitability waiting for your permission to emerge. The only question left is whether you're finally ready to stop watching from the sidelines and step fully into who you've always been meant to become. If this conversation touched something deep inside you, something that feels like recognition rather than inspiration, drop a comment and simply write, "I claim my readiness." No explanation needed, no justification required. Just those 4 words as a declaration to yourself and the universe that you're done with the waiting room of your own life. And if you know someone who's been stuck in wanting instead of being ready, someone who needs to hear that their moment has arrived, share this with them. They might need to hear these words just as much as you did. Your metamorphosis has already begun. The only choice left is how quickly you decide to embrace it fully.